Hi everyone, and welcome back to our third and final video in our series for the Washington County Community Remembrance Project's Racial Justice Essay Contest sponsored by the Equal Justice Initiative. Once again, my name is Katie Powell and I am a staff member with the University of Arkansas, specifically in the Honors College, but I'm also a member of the Washington County Community Remembrance Project and am a core part of the Essay Contest Subcommittee group. So just as a little bit of a recap, we've kind of walked through some of the nuts and bolts of who the Equal Justice Initiative is, and more specifically, who the Washington County Community Remembrance Project is. We've also gone through and thought about the nuts and bolts of the essay contest that will be launching hopefully in January for 9th through 12th grade public high school students. The Racial Justice Essay Contest is not something that we in the Washington County Community Remembrance Project judges, so we're here to help you with anything and everything that you need help with. So we talked about that a little bit in the last video, but then in this third and final video in our series before our workshop, which I'll be sure to plug at the end, we want to connect you to some resources, some ways to kind of start to think about the Racial Justice Essay Contest and some of the topics you might cover and address during your time. So without further ado, we'll take a look to share a couple of resources and get you thinking about some of the local instances of racial terror in our area that we think would be really powerful for you to begin to consider. So just a few reminders before we jump too far in. The essay should be between 800 and 1,000 words. That's a really critical component, so not super long, but not super short either, thinking about that. As a reminder, we are not given the prompt for the essay until the launch of the essay contest, so you won't be getting the prompt anytime soon. However, you are given sort of what we're calling a hint. So the hint is that the essays should explain the chosen topic using a specific historical event, explore how the injustice persists, and imagine solutions for a future free from racial injustice. So thinking about a specific historical event and how that injustice persists. So really trying to see that through line in the modern day. In addition, students are encouraged, and this is also from the essay contest facilitation plan, students are encouraged to reflect on how the topic impacts their own lives and communities. Students are especially encouraged to find connections related to their lived experience. So I think that's a really critical component. What I'm going to do today is talk to you about some outside resources and research that you can be doing, but I think it's critical to remember that the Equal Justice Initiative, the folks who are judging this essay contest, are really hoping that students will find connections to your own lived experience. So think about your own background, your own family makeup, your own experiences, and really try to connect what you're talking about to that. That's going to be, I think, a really critical component here. So keep that in mind, no matter what research we cover, that's going to be really important. Some other nuts and bolts just from our essay contest facilitation guide. These are some of the subject matter ideas that the Equal Justice Initiative gave us. So of course, I'm going to show you a few things that we have available at your disposal to start thinking about and researching, but I think it's really critical to understand the vast amount of tragic instances of racial terror that have happened in our past and are currently happening in our present. So if there's one that is particularly resonant with you, I would encourage you to pursue that, even if it doesn't get covered in what I'm addressing here in this video. A few of the examples they list, are enslavement, racial terror and lynching, resistance to desegregation, segregation in public spaces, mass incarceration, the death penalty, felony disenfranchisement, inequalities in economic policy, which of course is still ongoing today, unequal access to quality healthcare, as COVID-19 has shown us that may be something that's very, very closely affecting you, unfortunately, housing discrimination, redlining, unequal access to quality education, state violence, school to prison pipelines, voter suppression, we just had a presidential election, mass forgetting of racial injustice. And so of course the Washington County Community Remembrance Project is working against that forgetting of racial injustice because there is a mass forgetting. And then environmental injustice / racism. So those are just a couple of ideas. There's a lot more, but those are some things that you may want to think about. And again, connect back to your lived experience. So if you need a little help thinking about those things, we have some resources that we want to share, and I'm going to try to continue sharing my screen even as I click on these links, so bear with me. But our first resource that I wanted to really share with you is the Washington County Community Remembrance Project website. So specifically on our education tab, if we click on that, we will see, and I'm just going to take just a minute to make sure that I am sharing the correct screen. And I believe I can. So when you click on this, and this is just washingtoncountyremembers.org under our education tab, we've got a great example here, just sort of a great preface of what our deepest intention is, which of course is to expand our community's capacity for facing difficult truths. In order to do that, we have this education section to help educate our community. A lot of this is local, but we also expand into the national as well. So keep in mind that your focus in the essay contest will be on the local. So first, some information on the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement, which is really fascinating. We've got a documentary here on Oaks Cemetery. This was a documentary produced by some college students. And Oaks Cemetery is, of course, the location of where our plaque to venerate Aaron Anthony and Randall will be. So Oaks Cemetery documentary is great. The Ozark Black History from 1820 to 1950, that is from KUAF, and it shows a picture of a CD, but if you click on this link, you can actually listen to it live on a website. And so I think this is a really amazing and tragic overview of life in the Ozarks for African Americans from 1820 to 1950. So I'd encourage you to take a listen. I mentioned the Elaine Massacre of 1919 in our previous video, but there's some more information here, actually 2 separate resources available to you. And then we get into some kind of larger, more national scale resources. So EJI has some incredible reports. This is one, and I'm going to actually cover that in my next slide. Some incredible reports that I would encourage you to look at just to get a sense of the national context. Some of you might be familiar with the 1619 Project, which came out of the New York Times. It is also a podcast. You can explore 1619 here, but you can also just listen in on the 1619 Project to understand and reframe, really important, reframing the country's history of placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the center of our narrative, not sort of on the periphery. I mentioned some lynching resources, and this is a lynching public learning plan, which I think is really impressive, and then a creative essay on by an incredible scholar written about sort of imagining what it would be like to be on a slave ship from the perspective of one woman who was tortured on a slave ship with Venus in 2 acts. So that's really incredible. And then another educational resource here too. So that's just some of what's available to you in the education section of the Washington County Community Remembrance Project. I am also going to take you through the Equal Justice Initiative's website. So if you click on that, and I'm going to make sure that we can do that. So this is the Equal Justice Initiative. This is the larger group that we are part of. And I'm going to make sure that you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, and it looks like you are. So just under eji.org, if you click under Our Work, and then you hover over that, you should see racial justice, and that's where we are here. So similar to our website, we have an incredible list of resources that are on a national scale. So again, this would help you think about the national context, not necessarily some of the local instances that you're going to want to consider. But you know, really asking us to think about, and this is something that UJI does, I think I covered in our first video, but arguing that slavery didn't end, it merely evolved. And so there's reports on enslavement, there's reports on racial terror lynching that came after enslavement, there's reports on desegregation that began after that. And then of course, sorry, I'm gonna keep going through this, reports on our segregation, so sort of that Jim Crow era and segregation in America. With some really incredible archives and really powerful moving videos. And then of course the presumption of guilt, which is more contemporary involvement of slavery leading into the mass incarceration that we see. And that's something that of course EJI is really powerful in fighting against. So we see more information on that, and then some of our featured work. So this is some more information on community remembrance projects that take place around the country, which I think would be really incredible for you to read as you're starting to craft your own essays. Expanding historical perspectives, this is a really incredible calendar that EJI produces. I actually have one in my office that I look at every day. And so each day featuring an instance of racial injustice in our country, really powerful stories to read and share. And you might find something that's locally driven in that report. Same with like our lynching report, enslavement report. They're national, but they probably will also cover and address various things that happened in Arkansas. So really important to get that national context. And then a bit more information on their 2 sites. So the Legacy Museum, as well as the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. So again, this is just under the main EJI website. I jumped to it very quickly, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware. Let me make sure we're back in, and we are into our slideshow. So yes, Community Remembrance Project, Equal Justice Initiative. Also, our Fayetteville Public Library has some really incredible resources that I would encourage you to check out. We're going to have a worksheet with some of these resources a little bit more directly accessed, available after our workshop at the end of January. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to check out some of the incredible resources available. There's websites, reference books, genealogy books, search engines, and then of course, Library of Congress books. Excuse me. So a lot of that information is things that we can't get on the general internet and that isn't accessible just widely. And so it's really incredible that the library has these resources for you to be able to use. So those are a couple things to be thinking about. I think genealogy specifically, if you're interested in exploring your own family's history, the library has a wealth of information on local genealogy that they'd be happy to help you with. So don't forget about our Fayetteville Public Library and the incredible resources there. And then before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a few instances of racial terror in our local area that you might consider. A lot of these are very university driven because that's an area that I'm more familiar with, but I would encourage you, hopefully these examples can help you think about segregation in your schools or in your individual communities or within your family histories that I think would be really incredible and definitely in line with what EJI is looking for in the essay contest. So Nelson Hackett was a enslaved man who escaped to Canada and then was later returned and made international news. So he's a really incredible story. And there's a group of scholars here at the university that have started the Nelson Hackett Project to really try to uncover and tell his story. The integration of Silas Hunt, whose photo is here on the right. He was the first African-American man to come to school here at the University of Arkansas in 1948, so a really incredible leader. BAD, the Black Americans for Democracy, which was on the University of Arkansas campus in the 1970s. They were a student-led Black Power inspired movement that was really incredible. They did a newspaper, they did a student organization, they did a lot of incredible things. I've mentioned Oak Cemetery has a fascinating history. Slavery in the Ozarks is another one. The Federal Writers Project is actually some narratives that were collected. I believe it was in the 1930s for students, for people to go around and interview formerly enslaved individuals. So do keep in mind that white people interviewed them, and that definitely warps the story, but it's really interesting to hear, even as we're attempting to share stories and amplify the voices of African Americans, how the white perspective is still very much dominant in that. So listen with caution, but I think it's important to hear those stories as well. And then some of the local historians within our own project are working on researching and investigating other lynchings that took place in our area that you might want to address as well. So those are just a few instances of racial terror. Unfortunately, there are countless in this area, but I think it's really important to start thinking about locally, thinking about nationally, so you can consider your own work. Finally, I would encourage you to get in touch with us. Our website is, our email address is Washington County Community Remembrance Project, so WCCRproject@gmail.com. You can learn more about us at washingtoncountyremembers.org, and then you can also join us on January 27th at 4:30 p.m. for a virtual workshop to learn more. So more about that will be listed on the Fayetteville Public Library's Facebook page. That's all for our videos for now, but I really appreciate you listening. I'm excited to hopefully meet you virtually in person at the end of January, and truly we are here to help. We're more than happy to get in touch with you. So please get in touch with us. Let us know what questions you have, and hopefully this has helped you start thinking about topics that you might pursue for your essay contest. Thank you so much.